Greetings, caring viewers, to today's episode of Planet Earth, Our Loving Home. The first of a two-part series focusing on the deep interconnection between our oceans and the world's climate. The experts featured today are Dr. Steve Rintoul, an oceanographer from Australia's National Scientific Research Body, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization, and Professor Anders Lieberman, a senior researcher at the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research in Germany and the lead author of the Sea Level Change chapter for the coming 5th Assessment Report of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Oceans cover 71% of the Earth's surface, contain approximately 97% of the world's water, sustain a diverse array of sea life, and play a vital role in regulating our planet's climate in a multitude of ways, including through thermohaline circulation, also known as the Great Ocean Conveyor.
If you think about the globe and what does this overturning circulation really look like, it's probably easiest to start in the northern part of the Atlantic up near Greenland and Iceland. Water sinks at the surface there and flows southward through the whole Atlantic basin until it reaches the Southern Ocean. And then very strong currents in the Southern Ocean redistribute that water, carry it around the globe, spinning around Antarctica. That water then passes through the Indian and Pacific Oceans, ultimately returns to the Southern Ocean and gradually warms and becomes lighter again, and then flows back in northward through the Atlantic basins in the upper part of the ocean, and that closes the loop.
The oceans help stabilize Earth's temperature by absorbing heat, with approximately 1,000 times greater heat absorption capacity than that of the atmosphere.
The thermal circulation transports a lot of heat from low latitudes in the Atlantic near the equator to high latitudes near the North Pole in the Atlantic. The entire climate system is in tune with this thermal circulation operating.
The oceans influence climate mostly because they can store and transport vast amounts of heat and carbon dioxide. So the upper few meters of the ocean, for example, can store more heat than the entire atmosphere. So when we talk about global warming over the last 50 years, what we're really talking about is heating up of the ocean, because about 80 or 90% of the extra heat that's been stored by the Earth's system over the last 50 years has gone into the oceans. And so the oceans influence climate, and it also means that observations of the oceans are an important way for us to track climate change, because that's where the heat is accumulating.
Scientists estimate that the oceans currently absorb a third to 40% of the CO2 emitted from human activity. However, recent research by Dr. Jeffrey Park of Yale University, USA's Institute for Biospheric Studies, concludes that in recent decades there has been a reduction in capacity because the oceans are warming. If the oceans did not serve as a carbon sink, atmospheric CO2 levels would be much higher than the current 392 parts per million, perhaps reaching a highly dangerous 500 to 600 parts per million.
The other important aspect is that the ocean stores lots of carbon dioxide that we're emitting into the Earth's atmosphere by burning fossil fuels and by clearing land. About a third of that is ending up in the ocean. If the ocean removes that carbon dioxide, that tends to slow down the rate of climate change. They're helping to slow down or moderate the rate of climate change that would otherwise occur if all the carbon dioxide remained in the atmosphere.
What would happen if thermohaline circulation substantially slowed or even shut down due to the effects of climate change? Professor Lieberman believes such an event would produce huge instability in the planet's climate system, such as global sea levels rising 10 to 20 times faster than the current rate.
If you put in additional fresh water into the North Atlantic by melting Greenland or by having more discharge from rivers, from Siberian rivers which flow into the Arctic and then eventually into the North Atlantic, or change in precipitation pattern in the Atlantic, can freshen the North Atlantic so strongly that there won't be any sinking of water anymore. That would disrupt this thermal circulation, could make it stop. If you shut it down, in climate models, the temperature in the North Atlantic decreases by up to 8 degrees. That's on top of global warming. It's not a contradiction to global warming because it's just a reorganization of heat. So the Southern Ocean gets warmer, the entire Southern Hemisphere gets warmer, while the North Atlantic gets colder. The problem is that this would already influence agriculture in Europe quite significantly, but of course also the ecosystems and the Arctic sea ice cover. But it's because there's so much heat associated with this thermal circulation, it's going to disturb the entire climate system. And that means two things. First, global warming would increase or would accelerate slightly in this period. And there would be less CO2 uptake, which would further increase global warming too. Then the rain belt in the tropics would shift. At the moment, the rain belt, which follows the equator quite nicely, is slightly dislocated over the Atlantic basin because of this heat transport to the north, because this rain belt doesn't really want to follow the equator, it wants to follow the thermal equator, the warmest place.
When we return, we'll continue examining our oceans and their effect on global climate. Please stay tuned to Supreme Master Television.